But there's only one opponent that Trump hates so much that when he goes after them, he actually becomes them.
You know, the windmills, boom, boom, boom. Windmills, wing, wind.
That's right. Whether it's a person from another country or an inanimate object, Trump will do the accent. And you might be saying, wait, Desi, aren't those wind turbines? Yes, they used to be, but Trump calls them windmills, so they're windmills now.
Hello and welcome to episode 309 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week,
breaking news, as Joe was mentioning, the United Arab Emirates saying that it will leave OPEC and OPEC Plus as of May 1st.
the international oil cartel OPEC is fragmenting, and it has everything to do with clean energy and the electrification of transportation. It reminds me of when I left my Colombian drug cartel because I wanted more time to prune my rose garden.
We have a new target date for the arrival of fusion energy. Commonwealth Fusion Systems has applied for a grid connection to start delivering fusion electricity, and the start date may shock you. Or not. It's not anytime soon.
The Bay Area Rapid Transit System upgraded its turnstiles with a $90 million investment. It paid for itself in 6 months, whereas my new energy-efficient windows refuse to pay for themselves until I threaten them.
1 year after a massive blackout in Spain, their grid is humming along nicely thanks to increased deployment of renewables. While the blackout was initially blamed on solar, that was incorrect, and Spain has deployed a record amount of solar in 2025. Clean energy often gets blamed when there's a grid problem, and the Clean Energy Show often gets blamed when people don't like what we say. Personally, I blame James.
And you should. All that and more on this edition of The Clean Energy Show. And also, this week, why India won't build a bunch of coal like China did as they transform into an economic powerhouse, and how Oslo has only one road death per year now. We'll explain why. And home lighting used to be the number one source of electricity used in American homes. I was surprised by that, and now it's towards the bottom of the list.
Yeah, you and I were early adopters of energy-efficient light bulbs, and, that was a long time ago, and we've come a long way, and it's true, light bulbs used to burn 100 watts each, and now most of my bulbs are 7, 8 watts, 9 watts,
Sure.
That kind of thing. It's crazy.
Yeah, you can buy them at the dollar store for $3, so they work fine. I know because I've bought them at the dollar store for $3.
Yes, we've discussed this. I've had some, they're all supposed to last 20 years.
I've had some expensive ones not last very long, actually.
Yeah, some expensive ones.
I've been replacing my expensive earlier ones, which were only slightly earlier by a couple of years. Yeah, they're getting replaced.
Anyway, I just pre-ordered a camera. We're slightly late to this taping because I had this online purchase I had to get. I bought a camera endorsed by Jeff Bridges, the actor. I'm sure you're asking yourself, why would you buy a camera endorsed by Jeff Bridges? Anyway, they're these weird panoramic 35 millimeter film cameras. And they stopped making them years ago. They were made in Germany. Widelux was the name of these things. And, they were never widely popular anyway, but the factory burned down 10 or 15 years ago. So, these things have been unavailable. But Jeff Bridges, it turns out, is the hugest fan of these cameras. And on every movie he makes, he takes pictures with this Widelux panoramic camera, including some here in Saskatchewan. Jeff Bridges made a film here in Regina, where James and I live, and took lots of these panoramic photos. That was the best thing about that movie. That was a movie called Tideland that wasn't particularly good.
Oh, right. And that was made by Terry Gilliam.
Terry Gilliam, the director. So a bunch of our friends got to work on that movie that starred Jeff Bridges. So that was the fun thing. But anyway, they've revived this Widelux camera, and presumably Jeff Bridges must be paying for it because this is not an inexpensive thing to start tooling up a new analog camera in 2026. No. But anyway, the first pre-orders just went up because I've kind of wanted one of these cameras for a while, and I thought, well, maybe I can buy an old used one or something. But I heard about this project, and I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait for the Jeff Bridges approved version of the Widelux. So I pre-ordered it, but it's not going to come for 6 months or something.
Oh, where's it being made? Do you know?
They're being made in Germany.
Where they were before?
Yes. I don't know if it's exactly the same place, or maybe there's some people that used to be involved. But the first batch of production units went on pre-sale today. So very excited to get one of those in 6 or 8 months when they finally make them.
And we'll be posting those on our Patreon page as you take images of your rammed earth cottage that's getting constructed this summer.
Yeah.
That would be a nice use for it, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Wide panoramic views.
So as soon as we started talking about a marathon times last week, for some reason, why were we talking about marathon times?
I don't. Oh, robots. Marathon running robots.
Yeah, the robots running marathons, using batteries, changing their batteries. Well, as soon as we talked about that, Sebastian Saw must have listened to our podcast because he became the first man ever to break the 2-hour mark in a marathon.
Wow.
We mentioned what the record was. It was just over 2 hours. 1 week later, it stood for a while. 1 week later, it's changed. It's just, I think him, the Pope, a lot of people, Jing, they're all listening to the podcast, and we should be doing better than we are. So Adidas said the record-breaking marathon shoe would be available for $500 on its app, because Nike has been working on this for years and years and years, trying to create a marathon shoe that would break records. Couldn't do it. Yeah. That record stood the same, but Adidas came out with one, and it wasn't there for 2 minutes. It was gone. Everyone wanted to be faster. Yeah. Who's maybe a marathon runner, and people happily paid $500 for that. I wanted to also mention, in the best way I can, about our ongoing air quality monitoring project, because I live a couple kilometers away from a oil refinery, and maybe even closer to a steel mill. And we've been monitoring this since last June, I guess. And I've come to the conclusion that light winds are my enemy. It's at night, wind calms down often, not all the time here, but sometimes it calms down after the sun goes down. That's a bad thing. I had 100% VOC rating on my indoor quality air monitor that I put outdoors. Right. And when the air calmed down, it was 100%, went to 100% at one point. And I'm finding that light winds in any direction, because I'll wake up and I'll check it every morning, and I'll go back and look, what were the winds? And they were calm last night, for example, and I had very bad readings. So I went out to my car, because I was driving my daughter to school anyway, and I looked at the window, which was cleaned yesterday, and it had a dark gray film on it, almost soot-like. That is absolute confirmation that industry is abusing the residents around here. And I'm going to make a video on that. That is going to be quite hard-hitting and yet legally okay. I'm going to check with my lawyer, ChatGPT, to make sure everything's kosher and make sure the wording's proper. But yes, it's something that, I belong to the local neighborhood Facebook group, and there's a frequent question on there, like, what's Uplands like? What's this area where you live like? And people say, oh, it's great. A lot of people here, their parents will live here, then they'll live here. And they shouldn't. They should not live here. It is not safe for them and their families. And I'm going to warn them about that. I'm going to warn a lot of people about that. I was watching a thunderstorm. It's winter here. It became winter again, but before it became winter, we had a pretty intense thunderstorm outside that with frequent lightning. It wasn't an intense thunderstorm. It was frequent lightning. That was the only part about it. There was no winds. There was no downpours or hail. But it was frequent lightning. And I've never seen that before in April where we live in Canada. But I was watching it, and then all of a sudden, I could smell the refinery really heavily in my bedroom because my family was here. We were watching it out the window. The window was open from earlier. Then boom, the refinery comes in. And sure enough, you look out on the monitor and it's shot through the roof, the VOC. So I can confirm, I know where the VOCs are coming from. They're coming from the refinery, and they're also coming from the steel mill, which is worse than I thought. It's actually an electric arc steel mill. Now, Brian, also, in good news, it was 8-year anniversary of my solar installation this week. Had solar panels installed and turned on 8 years ago, this time in April. And I calculated all the megawatt hours that I made. I've got a pretty small system. It's only 3.3 kilowatts. Yours is significantly higher than that. You got a lot more roof area facing east, west, and south. But I calculated that it would power New York City for 22.25 seconds.
In what you've produced during the lifetime.
For 8 years, yes. So
that's not bad at all.
Not bad. It's significant. And we have breaking news from OPEC that happened just a couple of hours before recording on Tuesday, and it's pretty significant.
The country's energy minister telling Reuters that decision was made after a careful look at its strategies. He said the UAE is doing this at the right time without hugely impacting markets because of constraints on the Strait of Hormuz. Brian Sullivan joins us on the Squawk Newsline. Brian, what are you hearing?
Well, it's brand new. I mean, this is breaking news right now, and this is a big change to the global oil order. It's a big change to OPEC as well. The United Arab Emirates was one of the key members, one of the not first founding, but first members of OPEC.
Now, if you are a longtime listener to the show, you know that we've been talking about such a thing happening. This ties into what we've been saying for years on this show. Based on clean energy analysts first predicting it many years ago, those analysts, unlike many people, don't realize the benefit of EVs, the cost trajectory of EVs, the cost trajectory of batteries going down, solar going down, and all that. Some people just can't get that they can't conceive that. Well, OPEC nations, in this theory, will want to sell as much oil as they can, because a lot of OPEC nations, like your Saudi Arabia's, for example, which was the first example, they have the cheapest oil in the world, pretty much, and they'll want to sell as much of it as they can. And it's not that oil is going to go away suddenly. It's not. It's going to go away gradually. But they realize that this is a tipping point now, not because of the Strait of Hormuz, but because of things like the battery announcements that we had last week, where battery electric cars are superior in any perspective to gas cars. You could charge them in minutes. 5 minutes at most. They'll go for 1,000 kilometers. They'll go for 1,500 kilometers. That's the crazy thing about that. And they know that there's excess energy on the market for oil because of the transportation electrification that's been going on around the world. And as these prices get cheaper, as the cars get better, it's an existential threat to oil going up in price. And it's may go up a bit. I mean, the demand may go up slightly, but we expect it to stop and peak. If it's not peaking around now, it's going to peak within a couple of years or so at worst, and then it's going to plateau and it's never going to get better. It's going to go down forever. So you don't want OPEC selling oil and restricting output. You want to output as much as you can. To hell with everyone else. That was the argument. It would be every oil-producing nation for themselves, especially the low-priced ones. We live in a petro state, and we live in a petro province, in a petro country, and I've always argued that if you people don't realize this, the price of oil is going to go down, and this is why. And now we have proof of it. And sometimes, Brian, I'm a little surprised that when our predictions come true, because we've held them for years, and then suddenly they come true, it is it's unsettling, and it's actually happening. So yeah, that's what's going on, and don't blame the Strait of Hormuz or volatile oil markets. It's because countries like the UAE want to sell as much oil as they can, and the argument has always been OPEC will not stay solid. There'll be people who want to break out, and it's happened.
Yeah, and they're going to want to sell as much of it as they can, and because they can sell it cheaper than everybody else, because they produce it cheaper than everyone else who has higher production costs.
Like us.
Needs to worry.
Like here. Yeah. We have higher production costs. They're getting them down, but they'll never be able to compete with the lowest price oil in the world. And those people will start selling it, so the price of oil will go down, so our revenues to the tax base will go down, and we'll be in big trouble. Bigger trouble than we are now, even.
All right, moving on to a story from Power Magazine. We like to check in on fusion energy every couple of years here on the podcast. So this is kind of the latest update. Fusion, of course, has the potential to create massive amounts of clean electricity, but it's taken a long, long time, a lot of research. Massachusetts-based Commonwealth Fusion Systems has submitted an application to connect the ARC power plant to the PJM interconnection, the U.S.'s largest wholesale electricity market. PJM serves more than 65 million customers across 13 states on the eastern seaboard. Fusion has always been some years away, but this was an announcement we've never heard before. So what do you think the start date is that they're talking about, James, if they're asking for a power grid connection now? When do you think they want to start producing electricity?
Anywhere between 6 months and 5 years.
Longer.
Okay.
What they're saying is early 2030s.
Early 2030s. Okay.
Yeah. When we started this podcast in 2020, one of the reasons to do it was we thought from 2020 to 2030 was going to be a really interesting time in the energy transition. And 6 years in, I think we've been proven absolutely correct. You look at the trajectory of electric vehicles, just as one example, in the last 6 years, it's been kind of insane. And, every once in a while, we do talk about fusion because a lot of people hold that up as the holy grail of clean energy. But the joke is...
It would be, but where is it? And yeah, it's a question. We need energy now to decarbonize the grid by 2035 to meet our Paris climate targets and to save the frickin' planet we live on or have a chance at it. So that's great. But I maybe 100 years from now, everyone's running on fusion. Maybe I have one in my butt. My robot has one in its butt. I don't know.
We were probably correct to not spend too much time talking about fusion energy. If the focus is 2020 to 2030, and early 2030s is the soonest that they're saying for this. And of course, that's just a rough date. Who knows if they're actually going to make that. So they're planning a 400 megawatt fusion power station. This is in Chesterfield County in Virginia. They initially announced the site of the plant back in 2024. And this is in Data Center Alley in Virginia. It's an area known for a lot of data centers, and it's an area that's expecting to have a huge growth in terms of connections and grid power. So it's a good place to build it. But honestly, when I started reading the story, I thought, oh, maybe this is going to start before 2030, but unfortunately, no.
Well, it's still a lot sooner than to have a date is pretty significant for fusion.
I mean, early 2030s is not a super firm date as near as I can tell.
No, it's not. And also, that's one. We need a lot of them to happen in that time.
Yeah.
And
that's only 400 megawatts.
No doubt be expensive at first like everything else and then come down in price the more you make. And I don't think there's been any really, detailed look at how much the fusion electricity will cost. It's not going to be, probably won't be able to compete with solar and batteries the way things are going. But we don't know because there isn't one available to look at. But yeah, it's interesting. And I'm hoping that this comes sooner than later. It'll be great.
Yeah, for sure.
Safe kind of, nuclear power. So, well, Brian, I was really surprised to see that lighting was at one time, and I'm talking about, let's see here, 2004. In the United States, lighting was the largest use of electricity in the United States. Wow. Largest lighting.
I never would have guessed.
Your parents would probably yell at you to turn off the lights to save the electricity. Well, it was the biggest use of electricity at one time. And then around then, cooling became bigger because more people got cooling, and climate change and all that would make it hotter. It started to go down and down and down. And now it's way towards the bottom of the list because of LED bulbs that we've talked about. Trump tried to not have LED bulbs come to the United States and wanted incandescents or, to be back on the market again. And that didn't happen. That fizzled out. He was talking about windmills, the same thing, but he did go after bulbs, but it fizzled out because people, why wouldn't they want a cheaper electricity bill if that is the most price in your house? So around the year 2000, it was the highest. And 18 years later, after the dark days of compact fluorescent lights, which I look back upon with dread now, because it was a big innovation at the time, a big solution. And isn't this cool? We can save money and electricity and pollution, but they sucked. They're not as great as LED bulbs, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I spent a lot of time shopping for compact fluorescents, and eventually, toward the end of them being popular, they started to get not too bad. You could get some with a decent color temperature. And this is one of the arguments. Old-fashioned incandescent bulbs do produce a very nice form of light, but, advances in LEDs have been huge. The light from them is fantastic. You can get multicolored lights. I have all kinds of hue lights that can produce any color. They're absolutely amazing.
Yeah, so the third most electricity use was heating, then water heating, refrigeration, television, clothes dryers, computers, fans, and pumps. That surprises me because I got a lot of fans and pumps.
Yeah, me too.
I've got a pool pump. I've got a pool pump.
I got a radon meter pump.
And I use a fan at night because I get too hot in my bedroom because I can't open the damn window anymore because of pollution, and I don't want to die from it, or I want to prevent dying from it, which is inevitable as much as possible. Cooking, dishwashers. Currently at the bottom is EV charging, which is just only recently started to show up, but it's way at the bottom.
Yeah.
Combined with washing machines. So,
Yes.
yeah, that's where the problem is. It's not EVs. People think EVs are crashing the grid and all that. It's not true.
Yeah, still at the bottom, even though EV adoption has grown a lot. But of course, that will creep up. But yeah, most light bulbs used to be doing 60 watts, 100 watts, and now 6, 7, 8 watts. Huge difference. From The Guardian, an update on Spain. So a year ago, we talked about Spain's massive blackout that they had. And it was pretty much exactly a year ago. And as is often the case, renewables got blamed as soon as this happened, because it happened at a time when there was a lot of solar on the grid. It sort of happened during a very sunny period. So people just sort of leapt to the conclusion that, oh, this must be because of the solar. No, this is not the case. Everything kind of failed. This was really bad. A system black event in Europe, the first in recent memory. Traffic signals failed. Mobile networks stopped working. Petrol stations couldn't pump any fuel. Supermarkets couldn't process payments. The Madrid's metro came to a halt. People had to be pulled out of those trains. Crazy stuff. And the headlines at the time were things like renewable energy triggered Spain's blackouts.
Of course they did. It must have been the thing that's new. What else could it be? Because it was the entire country.
Risk.
It was the entire country pretty much, right?
Oh, yeah.
Only a little bit of power came back on late that night. But it was a pretty significant blackout.
Including parts of Portugal as well.
Right.
But other headlines, Spain at risk of fresh net zero blackouts, or Spain power cut caused by solar farm failures. But none of this was true. It was a widespread theory because blaming renewables for lack of inertia, which is the heartbeat of a grid traditionally provided by large spinning masses in fossil fuel and nuclear plants. And subsequent investigations have found conclusively that this was absolutely not a factor. And Spain was confident that it was not a factor, and they went on to install a record amount of solar, 13.8 gigawatts. There's a steady increase on the graph that we have here about Spain. They deploy more and more solar every single year, and they're working on a trajectory towards reducing the fossil power, increasing renewables, and this is only strengthened since the blackout. The plan wasn't to retreat back to fossil fuels. No, they saw that the future was in fact renewables, and this has really helped them in the current, fossil fuel price increases, because they've gone so hard at installing renewables that, the price shocks from oil have, not affected them as much as they would have normally.
Right. And 47 million people in Spain, which is a little higher than Canada, but not one of the largest countries in the world. It's very technical. I was reading through some of the reasons why. It's beyond the scope of this podcast, because we don't want to get too technical with people, and we don't understand these extreme things on the grid, although we're trying. I spent a lot of time trying to broaden my knowledge on some of these technical things. But yeah, it was not just, the same thing happened in Texas, right? With their storm a few years ago, the winter storm a few years ago.
Yeah.
Everyone blamed wind turbines. And it was actually the natural gas plants more than it was everything. Actually, it was, but mostly it was the natural gas lines had frozen, and even nuclear was having problems. I forget why. Maybe they're down for maintenance or something. But everything was having problems. It was just a confluence of things that happened. Yeah. But it was, wind renewables would have been about the least culprit there. BART, the Bay Area Rapid Transit System, that's the Bay Area of California, upgraded its turnstiles with a $90 million investment a little while ago. They serve 56 routes and 50 stations. It's pretty significant. It's 211 kilometers of stuff. And this is from a tweet by Akash Gupta. And I have a picture here for you to look at. There's the new turnstiles, if you can even call them that. The old ones you could just jump over in half a second pretty easily, like you can in many turnstiles for mass transit in the world. Well, these instead have sort of gates that open. They're like 6 feet tall, so you can't jump over them. They have to both sort of unfold open to go through them, kind of like a restaurant door to the kitchen. And they send people different places, and they have technology that prevents you from walking in right behind somebody, because that was one of the methods to use, was tailgating. Tailgating as you go into your transit station. Yeah, $90 million is a lot of money, but they're recovering $10 million in lost fares from people jumping over the turnstiles every year. So that means it would pay for itself in 9 years. But wait, there's a lot of other cost savings involved, which I found interesting. Some of this is societal issues, but there are many other cost savings from these gates that paid for themselves in 6 months. They only took 6 months, not 9 years, 6 months. That's because much of the savings are from damage done from less fortunate members of society who are now prevented from entering the transit stations and loitering there. Some of them were committing crimes. Some of them were doing horrible soiling events, things like that. And so they can't get in unless they pay. They can get in, but they have to pay. So less of them are going in. And the Embar's Cadero station went from 112 hours of corrective maintenance in the 6 months before installation to just 2 hours afterwards. So that is, it's less than 2% of what they used to do for maintenance. It's because they were keeping people out, which I find interesting. It's controversial. So the Daly City station saved 109 and other people saved pretty significant amounts. If you don't, you either pay or you don't enter. There's just no way in. There's absolutely no way to, maybe there is, some exceptions, but they feel that they've completely closed it off to fare jumpers. Some people argue free mass transit is good for society. We'll talk about that actually later in the show. So once you don't enter, you also don't smoke on the platform because that was an issue, cigarettes. There's people sleeping in elevators or living in there or harassing other riders, which involved police coming in and paying money to do that. Police blitzes were used in the past and they had little success. The $10 million in recovered fares is the smallest line in the return because fare revenue used to cover 70% of their operations. After the pandemic, it collapsed to just 22% because less people were riding. The gates won't fix that gap directly. They fixed the precondition for fixing it, a system that office workers, families, and tourists are willing to use again. So people are less hesitant to use rougher stations on the transit and, hesitant to use them. So ridership growth at stations with new gates outpaced ungated ones before the rollout finished. So they had definite evidence that people were using them more once they had these things in place. It is not known how much it will cost the city because people who are less fortunate or have problems and were soiling the stations, well, they're going to go somewhere else. They have to go somewhere. So I don't know if they actually will save money overall because they have to go somewhere, but at least ridership is up, which is what our purview in the show is clean transportation. So yeah, there's a story on this in Grow, San Francisco.
Yeah, people, who are less fortunate, who are homeless, they need places to go. They need services, but, in the subway was not the place. But you're right, they're going to have to deal with them probably in some other fashion in the area. All right, The Clean Energy Show is an independent podcast powered by its listeners. You can support us at patreon.com/cleanenergypod for as little as $1 a month, and you can get ad-free episodes, early access, exclusive behind-the-scenes content. Plus, we have a private Discord server you can join, discounts on merch, and even possibly score a shout-out on the show. Patreon.com/cleanenergypod. And thanks to everybody for helping keep independent climate journalism alive. Coming up next, it's the lightning round.
Time for the lightning round.
The Lightning Round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
More from Ember Research's annual report that we discussed last week. In 2025, battery prices fell 45% as global storage deployment rose 46% to 250 gigawatt hours. That is a lot. That's already enough to shift 14% of new solar generation across the day, improving system flexibility. So everything that's built last year with the storage would add 14% to the amount of time that solar is on the grid because it's spreading it out. That's pretty significant at this point. Denmark's energy mix this century, coal went from 85% to 3%. Wow. Wind went from, this is, since 2000. Wind went from 11% to 60%. Solar went from 0 to 13%. And renewables overall went 15 to 92%. Solar is now accelerating. They started with wind. and it started to displace coal. Now they're starting with solar because solar has become so cheap and prevalent that it's really kicking their butts.
Good job, Denmark. That's amazing.
Chinese car exports to Mexico are down more than 40% in 2026 after Mexico raised import duties to 50%. So those duties, those import tariffs do make a difference because China was selling a lot of cars and now they're building factories there. So we'll see how that goes. Driving a car on HVO, that's hydro-treated vegetable oil, is now 79% more expensive than an electric car, says new analysis. And that story was on Clean Technica.
Yeah, wasn't that a thing for a while where hippies were running their cars off of, used vegetable oil from restaurants and stuff? That was a thing?
Well, hippies, you were wrong. You were wrong. It's expensive. A CES Fast Fact, at $1.81 per liter, a driver of a gas SUV in Canada will save $67 over the 5 months that the federal government here has wiped out their tax on gasoline, while a driver of the Chevy Equinox EV would instead save about $940 over the same period. That's about $146 per month thereafter. So $67, yay, we're taking a little bit off of gas tax, but if you want to save $146, buy a damn EV.
Yeah, now we have a liberal government in Canada that tried for a long time to put a price on carbon, but, the prime minister changed, and recently with the spike in gas prices, it's kind of an easy political win, a short-sighted political win to give everybody a break on gasoline because it's really affecting people a lot. And, there's nothing people hate more than high prices of gasoline. On Vancouver Island now, diesel is $2.42 a liter on Vancouver Island. Yeah.
Well, I was watching an airplane video, a guy flying around in a small plane around Vancouver Island last night. He had to stop for gas at the North Tip, and it was over $3 there. And he was, this is horrible, but you got to pay to play. Wow. He said, you got to pay to play. This is the tweet of the week. This is from Mark Jacobson. In 2025, the U.S. Geological Service increased its estimate of world lithium resources over land by 30%. to 150 million tons. This is the estimate of how much lithium there is in the world, and it's always going up. Last year, the service raised their estimate by 30% to 150 million tons, with the U.S. having the largest resource, 30 million tons, followed by Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Australia, and China. So how much lithium is this? The world has 1.1 billion passenger cars and 375 million trucks and buses. Replacing these requires about 47 million tons of lithium, 9 million tons for the cars and 38 million tons for the trucks and buses. But that's only 31% of the 2025 known lithium resources. And keep in mind, the known resources grow each year as people keep looking for more lithium.
Yeah, we weren't always looking for lithium. So, you would get a report of how much lithium there is in the world. But, if we hadn't really been looking for it, that estimate is going to be low and too small.
My son in engineering, he had this prof that really made me mad a couple of years ago. He said there's not enough lithium to electrify the world. I say that prof should be fired. I call on him to be fired. People, listen to the show if you want to be smart, okay? Heat pumps have now outsold gas boilers for 4 years straight in the United States. This is something we always talk about, but 4 years in a row now. In Germany, despite a massive disinformation campaign against heat pump sales were up 55% in the first half of the year. So, good luck. Good luck. The popular BYD Seal, that's a car made by BYD, a Chinese auto company. It is a sedan, kind of looks like the Model S in form factor. We'll be getting the new Blade 2 battery that we've talked about 6 weeks ago. We talked about the announcement of the Blade 2 battery. We had another battery announcement by the world's largest battery maker last week, but they don't make cars. BYD makes cars and batteries, and it's going to have a 1,000-kilometer range, but still charges in 5 minutes. This is the interesting things that I've been seeing on the YouTube videos because China just had a big auto show, and some of the bigger car EV influencers went there, and Out of Spec Reviews went there, and I've got this on our Patreon page. It's there for free if you're looking for it. It's an hour long, as all of his videos are, but he talked to an engineer who's in charge of charging for BYD because they're rolling out these megawatt chargers, which look like a big letter T, and they have 2 chargers. They can charge over a megawatt each. They use batteries to to be able to do that. But the interesting thing is they're the same batteries that are in the car. So they have the same sort of specs. They have this really high output and really high input. And yeah, they will even charge up if you're at a dealership and they have them at a dealership, the cars will charge the battery at the dealership for the next person who wants to come. And they decharge so that you can show the customer them charging.
Right.
And that only takes 5 minutes. So they will actually discharge into a battery in the dealership, the BYD dealership, so that you can see, because honestly, to watch this, Kyle Connor of that channel, he's been doing this for years. He knows everything up and down with charging. He was blown. His head exploded. He said, it's over. It's over. The fossil fuel age is over. EVs were born today. And I believe that to be true. There's no reason now. And it doesn't matter if it's 1,500 kilometers or 800 kilometers range, the thing still charges in the same amount of time somehow.
Yeah.
Like they'll just charge in that amount of time. So it doesn't even matter. This thing also, by the way, 684 horsepower. Now, I'm not a car guy. I don't know what 684 horsepower, but I've come to learn that that's a frick of a lot of horsepower.
Here's what it is. It's way more than anyone needs.
Right.
That's how much it is.
And what happens is, rich people will buy them, give them to their teenager, and they will drive them into a cement wall accidentally.
Well, that's the downside.
You got to have a teen driving mode where it's really buffered. In fact, they suggest that for everyone because I saw one of the main people at BYD in Europe showing off a car, and she said, you got to be careful with these. We've tuned them so that when you drive them, they'll drive gently because they are more than anyone needs. But if you're into a fast car and accelerating fast on the freeway to get up to speed, well, it's a thrill. This summer, 9 of the 17 generators at Hoover Dam are going to be offline because water levels will be critically low. Something I've come to learn about hydropower, and there's a lot of hydropower in the world, not building a lot of it now, but it's susceptible to drought. And there's a lot more droughts in the world because of climate change, which is a sucky thing, but that's the way it is.
Hydro has mostly worked for the last many, many decades, but when you have more drought cycles, this can get to be a problem.
In 2025, electric bus sales hit 56% of new electric bus sales and the new EU city bus sales. That's in the European Union. 60% if you include hydrogen buses, which is quite a bit, but it's not 100%. In China, it's 100%. Everyone's buying electric buses in China, have been for some time, even before cars. So lost in the CATL battery announcements last week, the FreeVoy 2 battery, it's a new benchmark for hybrid cars, plug-in hybrid cars. So this is a car that has a little bit of electric range, and then it becomes a hybrid car, like a gas engine and a little bit of battery after that. The Toyota came out with a Prius, and I think it had 25 kilometers of electric range.
Yeah, the early ones were quite low on the electric range.
I still envy them, though. And then they got it up to 40. And I don't know what they are now. They might be 60, they might be 70 or 80. This one's 600, which is 50% more than my actual EV.
Yeah.
Just for
Your
driving.
biggest problem there might be that, gasoline doesn't last forever. Gasoline only has a shelf life of a year or something.
That would have been the problem with like an 80-kilometer range car, Like I was thinking that, and people in parking lots would ask me, but what do you do? I said, well, I don't know. Like, I guess you just put some additive in or something to refresh the gasoline. But that would be an issue.
Something like that.
Because
they can probably have it in their software to make sure the gas engine runs every once in a while. That probably helps.
Maybe. And I don't like it when gas engines run on those cars. So, yeah, that's very interesting. 600 kilometers. So it's quite possible you could go on a long vacation and still never use the gas engine because you would be cheaper to plug in, maybe, depending on where you are. So China's CO2 emissions declined last year, while India's did not increase, reports the International Energy Agency. So yeah, India's not doing too bad. They need to do a lot better, but there's a lot of encouraging signs from there. So back in 1975, Oslo had 41 road deaths per year. And by 2019, it was just 1. And that one, by the way, wasn't even a typical crash. It was a driver hitting a fence. So elderly, drunk, who knows? But what they did do, they ripped out 700 parking spots and turned that space into 37 miles or 60 kilometers of protected bike lanes in the city and had little pocket parks along the way. They lowered speed limits pretty much everywhere. And in a lot of areas, the completely banned cars. They created these heart zones around elementary schools, which we've talked about before. No driving in to drop off or pick up your kids. And what happened, retail sales actually went up because people, you think, well, they're not going to go to the grocery store, to the retail stores, but they did. They went more often because it was more pleasant. And kids started walking and biking to school on their own again, just like when we were kids back in ancient times. And the air got cleaner and traffic actually improved. The congestion of traffic actually improved. So, I would like to live in a city like that.
Yeah, any city that's done these types of experiments to reduce car traffic, in particularly the downtown area, they pretty much always work. This is always a win-win.
And we've got a letter coming up shortly, but the last thing we have this week in the lightning round is that there's a wide expectation that India, who is 10 years behind China in middle-class expansion, might go the same route and build a bunch of coal power like China did. Everyone's talking about all the coal that China built. Well, they built a lot of other things too to keep up with the rapidly expanding, as the middle class expands, which is a good thing. We want India to be not poor. We want everyone to be in the middle class or better. Well, here's why that won't happen. India's GDP per capita reached 10,000 per person in 2025. China was roughly at the same point 15 years ago. And in China, a massive expansion of demand for electricity because of that, and coal generation took off because of that. But what's the difference for India now, 15 years later? It's not the same world we live in, Brian. 15 years ago, obviously. It's not the same world when we started the podcast 6 years ago. Solar, wind, and battery storage are now cheap and very easily scalable. India's solar and wind generation per capita are already 5 times higher than China's were at the same GDP per capita level. So that is why things are going to be different now.
All right, let's dip into the mailbag. We have a very long, thoughtful letter from one of our listeners in Belgium on the comparison costs of nuclear and renewables. There was a study we mentioned on last week's lightning round, so let's go back in time to 1 week ago.
For solar, they made sure to include the costs of storage, grid expansion, stabilization, and flexibilization. In other words, you can't just say we're going to compare the cost of solar panels and inverters and to nuclear. There's other costs involved when you put solar because it's not all in one place like nuclear. And they concluded that renewables were 4 cents per kilowatt hour, nuclear was at 10 cents per kilowatt hour.
Yeah, so the letter's a bit too long to read on the show, so we put it on the Patreon page, patreon.com/cleanenergypod. And the writer has links to back up his work. Basically, the listener argues that nuclear waste management costs are typically accounted for through mandated funds like in Finland, Sweden, and the US, though there's a fair concern that long-term estimates may be too low and could leave taxpayers exposed. He also says cost comparisons should be consistent, noting that renewables often exclude system-wide costs like storage and grid upgrades, although the story was about how this cost comparison actually did include those things. And finally, he contends that high nuclear construction costs, like in the US, are not inherent to the technology, but stem from policy and industry issues with countries like France and South Korea showing nuclear can be built much more cheaply through standardized continuous programs. Yeah, just restarting the solar program is one of the things that's made it expensive because it just hasn't been done for so long in many different places.
Well, thanks for that letter. That letter was from an unsigned person in Belgium, and we won't speculate as to his name. So just thanks for writing. We appreciate everyone who writes the show, and especially when you send us interesting information that can broaden the knowledge of our listeners. It's right there on our Patreon page.
All right, you can find us on social media like TikTok, Instagram, and Blue Sky, where we're Clean Energy Pod. Patreon.com/Clean Energy Pod. The email, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And if you haven't already, please always hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you're listening to this podcast.
Thanks to our Patreon Clean Club executive members, Tiernan, Green Bastard, and Brett Routley. And thank you all for supporting our podcast. We'll be back again in 7 days.
See you next week.